psychotherapist or a parent-child art psychotherapist for so many years, I felt the need to create an assessment, an art-based assessment that will focus on the unique relationships among every dyad that we see and treat. And in this presentation today, I will share with you the JPP, the joint painting procedure. This is the tool, and I've been using this tool for the past 16 years and many people are using it in the clinical world. And in the past 5 years, I had the privilege to research it. So I will ask you today to use both clinical mind and research mind. And my research also is a mixed method research, so we can look at the qualitative parts and the quantitative parts. So as we all know, especially when we work with children at risk, the relationship between children and their parents are very crucial, and they're known to be a predictor of child development, adjustment, and resilience throughout life. So what is the joint painting procedure? And later on, I'll tell you about my theoretical background and how this is all emerged into one assessment. So this is an art-based assessment and clinical intervention that evaluates and focuses on implicit, non-verbal aspects in parent-child relationship in middle childhood. As I said, it has been utilized in parent-child psychotherapy and parent-child art psychotherapy and various other clinical settings. And it involves actually the parent and child painting together on the same sheet of paper, as you can see. So now I'd like to invite you to a little non-verbal experience and try to imagine, I hope you see it well, and relate to the non-verbal aspects of this encounter. And in terms of movement, every unique dyad has its own choreography, its own movement, its own rhythm, its own very special dramatic narrative. And in allowing them to use the non-verbal method, we can capture all those things. And my dream is that a dance movement therapist will take this and continue the research. So there's a shared dance and shared rhythm. You can actually feel what's going on in the rhythm here. So I already said it's a non-verbal intersubjective space that many things are happening, and it does, and I will talk about it later, it fosters mentalization processes. So what are the clinical goals? We want to understand the child's internal world and relational representations within the context of his or her parents. We want to observe also the potential for growth and change in the dyad as reflected in the continuous process of the joint painting. And I will soon talk about the process because it is a process. And we want to help therapists that they could identify and focus treatment goals related to the dyadic relationships. And even when people are working not in parent-child psychotherapy, it is very important to assess the relationships and then later on to work with the child and to see what's going on, to understand the context and the ecological way of thinking of the knowledge about this child. So what is the procedure? We have quite a large white paper. We use gouache paint. And the first, and it's about an hour. And we ask, they sit next to each other, as you can you see it here? They sit next to each other. And I ask each partner to mark a personal space on the paper in pencil. So this would be the mother space, this would be the child. And then I asked each partner to paint with the gouache paint inside their own private space. Because it's about, if I would do it with younger children, I wouldn't do it like that, in a separated spaces. But because it's for middle childhood phase, that's why I made it like that. Then I asked each partner to paint a frame around their personal space. Later on, I'll ask them to create a path from his or her personal frame to the other person's frame. The last part of the procedure is I would ask both partners to paint together in the area between their personal spaces. And as you can see in the presentation, there are many, many variations. After that, we hang the joint painting, and the dyad gives a name to the painting and creates a story, which is also, like Michal said, the knowledge, we get lots of knowledge about the relationship from the story. And the discussion then follows about their experience during the process and about the painting. So you can see how it evolves. Very few words about my theoretical background and how this. So first of all, I'm coming from the parent-child psychotherapy method, which is a mentalization-based model to treat relationships in childhood. And then, of course, we all share it, the art-based assessment. And art therapists from all areas have been developing all kinds of assessment as we have. I was thinking also, Sabine, that to use the Kastenberg method about this painting would be fascinating as well. And the last anchor would be the implicit aspects of relationships. And I will talk about it a little bit. As we know, we share it, the knowledge that the implicit parts of relationships are even more important and provide more knowledge about what's going on than the explicit one. And especially for this phase, this developmental stage, we don't have many tools to really capture the relationship, and there are many questionnaires. So that's why I felt the need to use something else. So as I said, how do we measure implicit relationships? It's very difficult. So the first thing, it's really important to observe the interaction in motion, in the here and now. And it would be very different than observing the mother and or child creating separately. For example, when I asked the child, because I do it in my clinic and in the research at my private practice, for example, I invited the child to paint her imaginative way, the way she sees her relationship with her mother. So she actually painted her ideal, her wishes. So she painted something very loving, lots of hearts, and I think it was the way she wanted to see the relationship. When I invited her to do the JPP with the mother, actually lots of anger and frustration came about, because when you work in motion with the relationship in life, things are just are enacted and responded. It's not like it's not the imagination. So then I realized that I had to, we need a manual, and that was many years of work. And the manual of the JPP, and now I'm going into the research part of the method. So there I describe 7 scales of relationships. I had to think after seeing for so many years, so many paintings, I was thinking, well, what do I see in the paintings? What aspects of relationship can I see there? And I find 7 main aspects. And then each scale includes the formal artistic elements and behavioral phenomena that exist in each phase of the procedure. And of course, it's very complicated. I'll just briefly, I'll go through the scales. And I want to remind you that we're dealing with middle childhood, so there are 2 main things in middle childhood in terms of the relationship. One is monitoring and encouraging autonomy from the parents to the child, but this is also the child's mission, to be more autonomous. And all this within maintaining close and warm relationships. So the scales that connected to the more monitoring part would be Individuation and autonomy. Well, you can see, example, a child, a father who doesn't have much separation and who does. The other one, the other scale is intrusiveness towards the child. And then the child dominancy in the relations. That would be, that was found to be an important scale. I'll talk about it later. And my favorite scale, which I will elaborate today, is the mutual recognition. As a clinician, I knew that it would be the most important scale, and actually I found it. And in terms of maintaining close relationships, it was motivation and investment in the relationships, emotional expression in the relationship, and implicit expression of anger and aggression towards the other. So I don't have the time to go into each one of them, but I will focus on mutual recognition. So, mutual recognition, the MR, and I measure it separately in mother and child. So it's the degree of recognition of the other as a subject with a unique inner world that includes thoughts, feelings, and intentions. The parents need to recognize and respect the child's inner world without ignoring their own inner world. But it's vice versa. At this point, at this age, we want the child, we want the child to recognize and respect the parent as a separate subject. And in the painting, while they paint, we want to see each one of them express themselves but respect the other at the same time. And I would like in the strong part to see an enjoyment and playfulness. So, for example, in the manual, high level of mutual recognition, I have 22 criteria, and I didn't say it, we need, it's a 1 to 4 on Likert scale. 1 would be very low, 4 would be very high, and a high level, 4, would be if 5 criteria out of 22 would be found. For example, artistic expression in the shared area are connected to each other through shared theme or formal element. Or each partner paints an image or formal element from their personal space. The mother or the child relates to the other's image. For example, here, this is the child, this is the mother, and after they did their own separate areas and they connected to each other, the child was very worried and she said, well, Mommy, your waterfall is very streamy. I don't know how it will work with my very nice field. It's too noisy there. And they had a discussion and the mother said, oh, don't worry, I could paint here a nice field. And she actually echoes the child's field in her own way. And the child said, okay, so I will paint the clouds. And she actually used the same method that the mother, and after they could share and relate to each other, they both said, let's do something new. And then they painted those butterflies together in the center. And the opposite example, for example, 1, low level of mutual recognition, again, 5 criteria out of 22, that would be the shared area is not painted at all. This dyad disagreed. They wouldn't paint together. They said, no, we just want to leave the painting as it is. Or one partner covers the other image, or one of the partners is over-dominant. For example, this is the child, this is the mother. The child painted something from soccer field, and he insisted that in the shared area, there would be only themes from soccer. He wouldn't agree anything from his mom. So he got a very low level of mutual recognition. So talking about the research now, the objectives of the research. So first of all, I wanted to validate the JPP, transforming, which was a very challenging thing, transforming a clinical art-based assessment into evidence-based assessment. And as Michal said, this is very important for our field. The other thing was predicting children's adjustment from the implicit aspects of relationship and from interaction between implicit aspect and temperament beyond the prediction of explicit aspects of relation and beyond measure of temperament. Of course, as being a clinician, I realize, and we're talking body, mind, biology, that temperament is very important And I try to include this and to see how it relates to the relationships. But I won't go into it very deep today. And the qualitative objectives were to understand the dynamics of the implicit relationship during the JPP. What's going on there when they paint together? It's, well, you can all read about it, but we had 87 mother-child diet. Of course, I'm sorry, mothers, again, it would be fascinating to do it with fathers, but it's always more easy. And I met the dyads at their homes or at the art therapy clinic for 2.5 hours. And they do this procedure. They also filled relationship questionnaires. That were the explicit parts. Child temperament questionnaire and adjustment questionnaires. The mother wrote them, and the teachers. The teachers were great, and it was fascinating to see how the teacher perceived the child and how and operates, and what's the connection between the way the child functions and the relationship with their mothers. So in terms of the results, the validation. So we had high inter-rater reliability. We had moderate good test-retest. It was interesting. I took 13 diets, and I saw them at one point, and someone else saw them after 3 months, and it was, I wanted to be similar, but not too similar, because 3 months it's a time during a child's life. And also we had significant correlations between similar scales of relationships. For example, the mutual recognition was negatively correlated with the mother and child report on control. Too much control, less mutual recognition. It's only, remember, one scale, few examples. Predicting adjustments, and I'm talking now about from the teacher's report, and we used regression analysis. So mutual recognition was found to predict learning skills. So if we had high mutual recognition, the teacher reported on this child as studying better, and vice versa. Also, we found that it affected social skills, which is logic. As clinicians, we would think about it. And high mutual recognition, we had less internalization problems, and vice versa. For me, it was fascinating. I would think that this would happen, but I wasn't sure about learning skills. And it really helped us to see how relationships, and you were talking about it, how it affects the functioning, even the cognitive functioning of the child. Just implicit expression of anger towards the mother also predicted social skill. I just had to tell you that. And it was really interesting to see this scale. We see it a lot in the clinic where the child is over-dominant and the mother allows it, or the father. So it affected the learning skills and the social skills, obviously. So anyway, in terms of the qualitative results, we found, and I analyzed 9 cases very carefully, so we found that mutual recognition was an important skill to support adjustment and good relationships. I also found mutual recognition instigates change in the relationships. And what was really fun, even when I saw really disturbing things when dyads came into the room, they always left the room very happy. And they all reported great enjoyment and strong sense of closeness. Something happened between the beginning of the process towards the end. So that would be my next research. What is going on in the process? I want to share with you an example, and I will read some of it because okay. This is Michael. He was 10 years old at the time, and he came with his mother. He came to the room very excited and thrilled, all grinning. And usually I start and I talk with the dyad. He wouldn't like to talk. He wanted immediately to start painting. He said, here, as you see, this is his mother part. And he suddenly, he was able to, this was his personal space right over here. This was the mother. He immediately started to paint. used all the paint around, and sure enough, he was all covered with the paint. All the paint was blending into brown paint, and he worked with his hands, with his elbows. It was a great joy. But when I asked to do, and his mother worked very carefully, she seemed to enjoy it. And when I asked to do the frame, he was able to do so. You can see it, it's an orange frame here. And then when I asked him to paint the path, he did an orange ladder. Can you see it? Ladder. And which is a very sophisticated symbolic path from him to his mother. And his mother drew an orange path here. It's hard to see. And then we got to the point of the shared painting, and again, he was all smeared with the paint, and he came almost to his mother area, and he said, I can destroy your painting. I can almost paint on yours. And she looked at him and said, oh, you're very excited today, Michael. And he stopped. He wouldn't go into her area, but he was very excited, but everything else was covered. And then his mother looked at him and said, Michael, maybe we can leave, maybe you can do one thing, or one symbol that wouldn't be covered, that will remain for later. What do you think? And he said, yes, let's do it. I want to paint a house. And he immediately took a pencil and painted a house. And he asked his mother to paint the roof. And then his mother did an amazing thing. And as you see, she was painting very carefully, creatively, but slowly. She suddenly took her finger and dipped it in the red paint, took her finger and painted the roof. He was amazed. She actually used his own bodily language and emotional language and used it in a very regulative way. And she painted the chimney. And he was so excited. He took his finger and put it in the gray, and he actually painted the door, the windows, and some dots here. And he was so happy. And then he said, okay, I have just one more thing to do. He took the other side of the brush, the tip, and he painted, actually drew this person. And he said, this is me. And he was so happy. We had a discussion later. He said that he had a great time. So it seems that that a high level of, at the beginning, Michael expressed a high level of anger and aggression, and also he has a very energetic temperament, and he couldn't produce an image. But then later in the process, his mother did two things. First, she used mentalization. She said, you're very excited today. Then she did an amazing regulation, because she actually used his way in a regulative way. And I think it allowed him to be, and actually I think Michael regulated her as well, because she wasn't so inhibited. She could use another way of expressing herself. And the red, she didn't have the red in her part. And of course, only then Michael could return to his space and paint a clear image of himself as separated and present in the relationship. So during the JPP process, implicit representation of relationship were enacted, met, and changed. This is the Stern word. From the joint meeting and the interplay of representation, a transformational representation was created. For example, Michael no longer experienced himself only as a distractive, as I'm sure he is in school, but as being capable of creative expression. The mother experienced herself as having the ability to communicate with Michael in a receptive manner while helping him express himself in a regulative way. The experience of the transformation occurred individually, but also enabled the creation of a new relational space in the relationship, which contained playfulness and creativity through authentic expression between Michael and his mother. So I won't go into it, a little scheme that I made. So if we want to reach the mutual recognition, as I think happened, there. I know. We need to have the mutual regulation that was there, the mentalization processes, and I think they both leading to mutual recognition, and we can see it in the research and in the clinic. And everything in a non-verbal, implicit bodily way. So my conclusion is that implicit aspects, and with the whole research, which is more complicated than what I present here, the implicit aspects of relationships provide a clinical picture of individual adjustment profile, even more than what they say about relationship and the child's empowerment. And also, the JPP emerged as a significant port of entry that invites mutual recognition. Actually, in a way, I think that the JPP represents the essence of parent-child art therapy because it enables the power of artistic co-creation, connection, and transformation. Thank you.